Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. I wanted to let you know that we have created a 6-month guide to marketing your e-commerce store. You can download this guide by visiting getosi.com/guide or by texting GetOSI to 33444. This guide will show you how to get more traffic, sales, and conversions for your online store. Get the guide right now by visiting getosi.com/guide or by texting GetOSI to 33444. Welcome to the e-commerce marketing podcast. Today's guest is Scot Wingo. Scot is the CEO and co-founder of the on-demand mobile car wash app Spiffy. He's a 4-time serial entrepreneur and industry thought leader in the e-commerce and on-demand economy realms. Scot has appeared on CNBC, The Today Show, and contributed his expertise to the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, and Bloomberg. And if everyone can give a great welcome here to Scot Wingo. Scot, we appreciate you joining the e-commerce marketing podcast today. How's everything?
It's doing great. Thanks for having me, Arlen. I'm excited to be on the podcast.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks again. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of get right into it. And for those guests that aren't familiar with terminology, why don't you break it down for us and just let us know what is actually, before I kind of get into that, why don't you give me a little bit more of a background on what exactly you do and tell me a little bit about your app.
Yeah. So what we do at Spiffy is on-demand car wash and detailing. So it arose out of a series of experiments we did. I'm a big fan of Uber, which is kind of on-demand transportation, and had invested in some car washes historically, and then thought, what if we married those two things together? And so we just put an app out in 2014 that in a series of like 5 or 6 taps lets you schedule to have someone come wash your car. And what we discovered is people really like that. And the big surprise for us is people like to have their car wash while they're at work.
Okay.
A big portion of us are kind of what I would call office dwellers. So we spend a good 40 hours plus a week at our office. And what better way to multitask than to have kind of something checked off your weekend to-do list than to have it done while you're at work. So that's the bulk of what we do. Is probably 60%, but we still do go to people's houses mostly on weekends.
Okay.
And we do some fleet washing as well. We found there's a lot of folks that have 3 or 4 vehicles they want cleaned on a regular schedule, so we do that too.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, that's an awesome service. I wish you guys were down here in my area in Orlando. I was just looking at my wheeled wells of my car, and they're like very dirty. I don't know if I've washed my car in the past few months. I've been so busy. But yeah, that would be a great service to really have. And I see the power of that, because like you said, these days, I know a lot of people would like to get that done while they're at work, because, the car is just sitting there in their lot. And so, if they could just check one thing off their to-do list for the weekend, that frees them up, with something else that they can do.
Yeah, and I know that this is an e-commerce podcast, and I have a pretty deep e-commerce background. My previous company was called Channel Advisor, and at Channel Advisor, we help folks sell on eBay and Amazon and across the internet. So I know a fair amount about e-commerce, and a lot of people always ask, why would you go from e-commerce to this? And I actually think this is the direction e-commerce is going to go. Mm-hmm. So we all worry about the Amazonification of things out there. Amazon just announces anything like they're looking at the pharmacy space, and pharmacy stocks drop 20%. So everyone I imagine listening, where it kind of keeps an eye on what Amazon's doing. Sure. And what I think is interesting is if you can take your product offering and wrap it in a service, then I think that gives you a fair amount of defense against an Amazon kind of doing that, because their model is so pure product driven. They have a couple of service things, but they don't actually provide those themselves. They use third parties. So I actually think kind of probably the takeaway for your listeners is, how can you take something and wrap it in a service, kind of like Best Buy has done with Geek Squad is a good example, sure. To future proof what you're doing.
Right. Definitely. That's awesome. And I think that's definitely the direction, like you said, that e-commerce is really going these days. And so as far as like Amazon, I think most e-commerce businesses these days, if they don't have their eye on Amazon and kind of seeing what they're doing, then, they're kind of living in a dream world, because Amazon is, unfortunately, they're kind of a behemoth in the space, and they're a force to be reckoned with. And I don't think they're really going anywhere. So it's definitely something you have to keep an eye on. So as far as enlightening our listeners, I wanted to ask you what really, for those of you that are listening that aren't familiar with the terminology, what actually is the on-demand economy? How would you define that?
Yeah, it's interesting. And since I've been in this industry, there's a wide spectrum of how people define it. Some people are kind of what I would call on-demand purist, and they kind of say if it's not something that can be instantly delivered, like an Uber kind of a thing, like within minutes, it's not part of that economy. I prefer to take a broader approach, and I even put like Amazon Prime Now. So anything that tends to be app-based, that the consumer can request something and or schedule it, for their convenience. I have a pretty broad definition. So the big companies people have heard of are there's obviously the transportation guys like Uber and Lyft. Mm-hmm. I also put Postmates, Instacart, even the food delivery companies like Grubhub, and even the meal kit companies I kind of put in there, mm-hmm. because you're kind of on demand getting these meals, the ingredients for meals delivered to you.
Sure.
So I think it's got a pretty broad definition. And, in our world, it's interesting. We try to be very customer oriented. So we give customers the ability to do kind of the on-demand, I want something today, or to schedule. And what customers kind of tell us with their voting with their wallet is about 60% like things to be scheduled. And mm-hmm. I think we're all so busy that there's kind of an element to scheduling that's been lost in some of this mindset that's out there. And then the other 40% are more kind of like on demand. So what happens is we'll go to these office parks, we'll set up and start washing cars, and people look out the window and be like, mm-hmm. I could use a car wash today. So that tends to be the bulk of our on demand is kind of when people see what we're doing at an office park.
Gotcha. It's interesting. Yeah, thanks for that definition. Would you consider the services where you mentioned the grocery delivery service, and that's big in my area here in Orlando, Florida, but there's also some services where you can do. Walmart actually just started this recently. I guess it's probably been several months now. They have a pickup service where you can order, and I actually use it. You order your groceries online, you put everything in a cart, you check out, you pay for them, and they kind of put a hold on the charge until you pick up the items. And so everything is ordered, and then all you do is using their app, you specify a particular time period of when you're going to pick up the items. And so let's say I order for a pickup tomorrow, let's say 10 a.m. I let them know through the app that I'm on my way, and then they're notified when I get there, because I go to a designated spot, and they just come out and bring my groceries. Would that be considered on demand as well, or is that a little bit different?
I take a pretty broad definition. I would put that in there, and I think the other elements of on demand are that it's a switch of who controls the transaction. So it really is kind of switching it from what's best for me, the merchant, to what's best for the customer. I think that's kind of how I ultimately think about on demand.
Right.
And that's what's so it's really interesting. There's this data out since the recession that talks about, call it the bifurcation, and you see this in the retail e-commerce world especially. So because of the recession, people kind of had two reactions. About half the U.S. population said that was scary. I want to save every dime going forward, and those are the value-oriented consumers. Mm-hmm. And then there's another section that said, what, that made me realize that time with my family is important, or doing the events I want to do. So I'm going to actually kind of favor more convenience. You're squarely in that camp because you're using the buy online pickup grocery kind of feature, right?
Right.
You're trading off a little bit of extra money for time. And there's studies actually now that show that that's actually more rewarding than buying things. So actually saving time is more rewarding than going and buying a new pair of jeans or something.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm in that camp as well. To me, just roaming around the mall or searching for stuff, or just wandering the aisles of a grocery store, it's not rewarding at all. It's more of a drag.
Yeah. And when you look at the same store sales of retailers, it really kind of paints this story. So the companies that are doing well are in two buckets. I guess three. They're the e-commerce companies like Amazon's growing 30%, right? And then you have dollar stores. Dollar stores are growing 10%, and this is in a retail environment that's like 3 or 4%. And then you have wholesale clubs. So dollar stores and wholesale clubs are very much value oriented. Amazon is very convenience oriented. Mm-hmm. If you don't offer one of those two things, you're stuck in this no man's land today. And a good example of that's like a Macy's, or millennials tend to be kind of hyper convenience oriented. So if you targeted millennials, and they're kind of like they're not coming to the mall at all, and those guys are practically in bankruptcy, as you know. So I think it's I would encourage listeners to think about that metaphor of how can they, be it if you're a retailer or a brand, how can you appeal to one of those two audiences? And that's really where the U.S. market at least is going right now.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I think the listeners out there that have an e-commerce business have definitely got to be mindful of, and figure out, because that's where everything is going as far as the millennial generation, and those are the types of options that they're comfortable with, that on-demand ability. So overall, with the on-demand economy, how do you see it really overall changing e-commerce? I mean, do you think, because of course we talked a little bit about Amazon and some of the other things, how do you see it changing e-commerce? And do you think there's going to be any drastic changes with some of the big guys? And how's the space going to be, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think there's two ways it impacts the e-commerce landscape. The first is delivery. So, consumers, one of the things Jeff Bezos kind of famously says is, when he started Amazon, is I don't think in 10 years consumers are going to say, I want my stuff slower. So Amazon's kind of made a 10, 20-year bet on faster delivery. And so I think that's an easy one today for e-commerce folks to leverage. So you have Uber, Rush, Postmates. There's a variety of these, Shipt, Deliv. There's about 10 companies that are pretty interesting. A lot of them are integrated with the platforms like a Shopify. This can offer a segment of your customers, same-day delivery. And I think that's a huge win in the e-commerce world, and something you could even, if you rolled up your sleeves, you could get, some major cities done by holiday this year. So that's kind of a short-term way to think about it. And then long-term, I do think, if you can take your product and wrap it in some kind of a service that has an on-demand element. I know you probably saw IKEA acquired TaskRabbit, and that's one where IKEA is saying the most inconvenient part about our product is the assembly. So right. No one, I've been up many times past midnight, wrestling with Allen wrench, and then you look and you put one panel in backwards, and you have to go disassemble the thing, halfway. So if you have a product that has to be assembled, has some kind of customization, there's a lot of products that fall into this, even like it has to be installed in some way. If you can wrap that in a service, it's hugely beneficial, because it really helps your brand with the consumer. Right. But then it also decommoditizes what you're doing. You're no longer selling a widget. You're selling a widget wrapped in a delicious service coating that, I think helps with that. Not only does it decommoditize it, but it helps in this world where there's private label and Amazon and prices race to the bottom. That service may really differentiate you. So definitely. Yeah, so that's what we've discovered at Spiffy, is people really love the service component of what we do. Gotcha.
Yeah, I see that. And I was just trying to think about, e-commerce businesses in general. Here at OmniStar, OSI Affiliate Software is our software. And, we have a referral solution that allows any business to create an affiliate referral program. And we get a lot of customers in. I was thinking about the different niches of businesses that are using our software. And one niche that we're constantly seeing more and more companies use our software is in the women's hair space, the actual hair extension space. So we've got a lot of customers, and I was just wondering, okay, how could on-demand service apply to them? And I just thought about it, that one thing that a business like that could do, because they sell hair extensions, women order it, they get delivered, but of course those extensions have to be, I guess you wouldn't say installed, but I guess you'd say they would have to be put in by a beautician. And so one particular idea could be, let's say one of these types of businesses that sell hair extensions, they could team up with salons or beauticians and have an on-demand component attached to the site, where after you purchase, you can maybe have access to a schedule in your area where, when your item's delivered, you can have that particular beautician. You can book an appointment. Maybe there's beauticians that do, that come to your house, that type of thing. That could, I'd say, be a great on-demand opportunity for that particular space. So I see how you kind of do have to think out of the box, but that's what people are looking for these days. And I think that's, something that could be useful.
Yeah, that it sounds out of the box, but there's actually in several metros there are on-demand beauty companies that will come to you. So Glam Squad is a really big one in New York City.
Right.
So you could definitely see a tie-up there that would make a lot of sense. And then if there's not a mobile one available, there are starting to be more chains, especially with these blowout. I'm not an expert on this, but I do know that there's these blowout chains that do more just hair drying and washing and not cutting. And I bet partnering with one of them to have an extension kind of installation or whatever we want to call it. If you were a consumer and you're looking at option A, just buy it and I have to do it, or an option B, buy it and you help me get it installed. More and more consumers are leaning towards B versus A. I call it the do it for me, DIFM, versus the do it yourself kind of mentality.
Exactly. Do it for me. Yeah. In our space, the online product space, it's known for we see a lot of other companies that offer services that are called done for you, or we'll do it for you. So it's like, people these days are becoming more and more accustomed to, on demand and having things done for them. So the bottom line is, like you said earlier, I think these days people are putting more emphasis on their time and then prioritizing their time a lot more than they did in the past. And that's very important for most people. And that's how these services really can benefit. Now, of course, we talked a lot about, a little bit about your business actually. And of course, how your mobile car washing app is, of course, an on-demand app. And, you're entrenched into the space. And, everything seems like it's great because we see all of these online on-demand businesses and apps, and you can pretty much have just about everything done on demand these days. But we see the trends are really going that route. But overall, from your experience, do you see any downsides to the on-demand economy at all?
Well, one of the things we decided early on is when we discovered this office park phenomena, we have to work with these businesses called property managers that control the access to the property.
Right.
And, they don't want just kind of some random contractors to come on. So one of the things we ended up doing is, we actually employ our technicians and own and operate our own vehicles. Okay. I think this kind of the gig 1099 thing works for some things, but in a situation where, especially in more of a B2B kind of a situation, you're going to be looking at more of an employed kind of a model. So that's one of the we kind of think of that as on-demand 2.0, is kind of actually saying, look, we need, if we Spiffy want to provide the best service possible, we're going to need to control what chemicals get used, right, the environmental friendliness of this whole thing. We want to be able to schedule it. So a lot of people call that a full stack kind of a solution. So that's one way that this is going. And you even see it with some of the driving, ride sharing. Uber's had a lot of controversy around the CEO and whatnot, but even the drivers, they can only background check so much and control so much because they're effectively 1099 contractors. So I think you're going to see more hybrid models and more pure kind of employee type models because that's a better customer experience.
Right. Yeah, definitely makes sense. And the only thing that I see as far as just from me kind of looking at the outside in, I'm not, that exposed to, on-demand economy. But, the only other thing that I see is, I guess this is could be a downside on the consumer side, not necessarily the business side, but with all of these conveniences in the on-demand apps and technologies out there, it's setting a different expectation for customers, where customers are just expecting to be able to get all of these things on demand. And, if they're dealing with a business, maybe a new business that doesn't offer some type of on-demand services, they're going to be a little turned off, or they may shy away from that. So I'd say that, it's a slight downside, but I guess it just speaks to the fact that businesses these days have to really kind of keep their finger on the pulse of where this whole on-demand economy is going, and really figure out how they can navigate properly and how they can be a part of it, or just kind of get left behind.
The name I kind of call that one is this kind of, the desire for zero friction in your life. And let's take you, for example. So you've done the Walmart buy online, pick up in store grocery thing.
Right.
And you used to, before that, you probably would go grocery shopping for 30 minutes and not think twice about it and wait in line 15. Now, the next time you do that, it'll be like 10 times more painful.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So
I've had that experience.
Yeah. To your point, to the listeners, this, it's kind of the same thing. Once Amazon got everyone addicted to 2-day free shipping, then all these flash sale sites that had 6-week shipping and stuff, that's one of the reasons they haven't done. They kind of hit a ceiling is their model, you saved money, but people weren't really willing to wait, weeks to get their product. So everyone, it's only going to get worse or better for the consumer. So yeah, I think you can either kind of bemoan it or you can lean into it and say, what can I do to get in front of this and get my products to the consumer faster, provide a service. And then for the service companies that are out there, these days of kind of the cable company, 8-hour, well, we're going to have a window between 9 and 5, and they always show up at like 5:30 after you take a day off from work. Those days are over. The consumers are not going to put up with that. Once a competitor comes along and says, go do whatever you want to, and we'll show you, where our truck is, and then you can plan to be home when you see it heading over, then that's going to be a huge game changer. And I think that's where not only the service economy goes, but the service plus product economy goes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely see how, that's one aspect where the service, like you said, the service economy, they haven't fully adapted systems to kind of do what you just said as far as, people having alternate ways other than sitting around waiting during a 4-hour time slot for a cable guy. I'm sure they're working on it because, believe it or not, they do know that people are accustomed to the on-demand, and if they don't get it, they're going to look at other options. So that's definitely the way things are going. So one final question for you, Scott. We always ask every guest in the podcast is, what is one thing that an e-commerce business can do right now to help their business grow, get traffic, get sales? Doesn't necessarily have to be related to on-demand economy, but what do you think a growing e-commerce business can do right now?
Yeah, so kind of in that framework I talked about, I would spend a fair amount of time soul searching and talking to customers and figure out how can you reduce friction and make your customer's life more convenient. That's one bucket. But if you want to go after that convenience-oriented consumer, if you want to go after the value-oriented consumer, it's really kind of a price play and looking at, that consumer is pretty savvy. They're looking at bundle pricing and per units and wholesale club kind of stuff. So maybe that's another angle you could take is sell 8-packs and 12-packs and things of that to help get the price per unit down for that consumer, but still kind of protect your margin in some way. Yeah. So my final advice to folks is to think about that framework I talked about, the value-oriented consumer and convenience-oriented. Decide where you as a company want to be. You can't really be both. And then if you want to be convenience, start thinking about how can you get products faster? How can you provide a service with a partner probably or yourself? And then if it's value-oriented, then think about, how can you do packaging and things like that to provide more value to the consumer.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And, the main thing is customers and looking at what their needs are and, just making sure you pay attention to the trends that you see, because believe it or not, usually in a business, your customers are going to really tell you and dictate the direction that you should go. So, there's a variety of ways you can get feedback from feedback forums to just having your support people talk to them and ask those questions to figure out, what are some things that are gonna be best for them and what are some things that they're interested in. Of course, you can't do everything. There's no way you can please everyone. It's definitely one thing I want to definitely state, but you will see common trends and common questions and requests from customers that can help sway your business into the best direction.
Yeah.
Okay, well, great. Well, it was definitely a pleasure speaking with you, Scott. Thanks again for joining us here on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. It was a true pleasure, and we appreciate you enlightening us on the on-demand economy.
Sure. Thanks for having me today. And if folks want to find me online, I'm on Twitter as just Scot Wingo which is SCOT, just one T, WINGO, like bingo with a W. And then I'm on LinkedIn. So again, just Scot with one T, Wingo, and look forward to hearing from folks.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. To access e-commerce videos and other resources to help your business grow, please visit getosi.com/videos. Subscribe to us on iTunes by searching for E-commerce Marketing Podcast, and please leave a rating and a review. Thanks for listening. See you next time.